Hello, everyone. Welcome to podcast 10 of the No One Asked podcast. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Brock. Welcome. Another week, another day at work.
Yes, it is. If you think we miss anything or you want to share your opinion on our takes in this podcast, let us know over at nooneasked_podcast on Instagram. And yeah, just fill us in. Let us know how you feel about the podcast that we put out today. So
yeah, definitely. And if there's any other topics or outreaches you want us to make, definitely let us know at the No One Asked podcast Instagram. Obviously, that's where we go for all our feedback. And with a lot of seasons coming to an end or just beginning, there's a lot of space for some new interesting topics if anyone's interested.
Yeah, there is. Exactly.
So yeah, just let us know what you guys are eager for and want to know more about, whether that's just going into more details with the sports we're currently talking about or some new ones that you're interested. Yeah, just hit us up.
Exactly. Hit us up. We're always want to get into new sports. I'm seeing the MLB playoffs right now. They look pretty interesting. It's all going off. But I guess the big news, Wallabies out of the World Cup.
The World Cup in general. A lot of not necessarily upsets, but results we may not have wanted to see.
Yeah, it really wasn't. I mean, starting with the most disappointing thing, England smashing the Wallabies 40-16. At the end of the day, it's just disappointing that you spend all week waiting and wanting and hoping for the Wallabies to win, and then they lose. And I mean, just before I get into it, I really just want to, in a way, it's a bit of a weird thing to say, but I sort of want to thank Cheika for what he's done for the Wallabies, because at the time that he come in 2014, when we looked like a mess, I was sort of losing interest in rugby, and then that 2015 World Cup campaign sort of turned me around and got me back into footy. And I mean, it's been a struggle ever since. I've been addicted to it way worse than I was before.
We missed out on the glory years from that point where we were actually good in the Super Rugby and a few things.
Exactly.
And a few years too late.
Yeah. And that 2015 World Cup gives you hope and makes you stick around. But I mean, at the end of the day, I always have had a sort of a liking to Cheika. I think the way that he coaches is sort of something that I sort of aspire to coach like, in that he's all for the players and he's all out. And I think his tactical misguidance or whatever, whether he come from a simple error or his backgrounds at Randwick and whatever, and his rise through the ranks was pretty quick and pretty swift, not a lot of time to, struggle with adversity. I think that's hindered him. And I think it showed on Saturday night when, we put out a performance that was dreadful. Just, I don't think anyone in the Wallabies cared about winning. Oh, no, that's a really hot take. But I don't think anyone in the forwards, besides Pocock or Hooper, actually gave a shit. And even in the backs too. I mean, Will Genia was sort of a no-show. Lili was, I don't know, he had a quiet game. Sanu and Jordan Petaia actually looked good. Marika looked good. But again, it's the same issues that always arise, is no one works for the forwards besides Hooper and Pocock. So we had no ball support. And then we misused our backs. All it was crash balls to Sanu or Jordan Petaia being forced to try and beat England on the outside. We didn't utilise our wingers until Marika scored. And when he scored, he ran like 50 metres, gassed half the English team and scored a 50-metre try. And he would have had another one near the end hadn't they turned it over with 5 minutes to go. And it's just, it just comes back to the fact that the most disappointing thing is that the forwards didn't give a shit. No one cleared out. No one worked. We had 64% of the possession. I don't know. I mean, Brock, you didn't catch the game, did you? Because you were busy, but
yeah, no. Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch it live. But just looking, throughout the entire World Cup for us thus far, well, the entire World Cup that we've been part of until this point, it's a lot of good signs, and our backline is actually really good. Like, I've been incredibly impressed with it in pretty much every game. But I think, Cheika's got his head right in some areas and doesn't in others. And it seems, whether it's his fault or some other coaching staff, it seems like our backs don't have direction. It's like they're really good players, but but everything you see good from them seems to be, you know, something they've strung up between themselves and they've just made out of nothing. And, you know, whether it's Korobidi, you know, making a huge line break just because he's strong, or Kudrani, or like, you know, a lot of people are doing things individually and making something. It's not a good whole team performance coming together to make something beautiful. Like, and that's what I've seemed to find in every game. And the forwards, yeah, like you said, it's been the story of Pocock and Hooper being the only good players we have, and whether that's laziness or our players, you know, you can make your argument, but it's just such a lackluster performance and a sad performance to go out on. Like,
it is.
It's not the worst first half, and coming out after second half, like, there was a lot of hope, and then it just, you know, we didn't score a point after the try in the first half.
Yeah.
Like, it's just all went one way for England, and, you know, it was a lot of penalty goals, more so that they beat us on. Like, I'm pretty sure that probably beats us on its own almost.
Yeah, it does.
But, you know, that's the game we play and love, and unfortunately Australia caught the wrong side of the game, but I think it's a lot of what was expected almost too.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think this game coming up for England against the All Blacks is going to be the World Cup final, essentially. I think I'll get into that a bit later, but like you said, our backs, they genuinely look like they have no direction. It seems to be, you know, whether it was Pataya or Karevi would make a half break or a break and then offload, and that's when the backs look explosive.
Yep,
there seems to be no planning for who we want to target, what sort of mismatches we want to like expose, because you look at the All Blacks, and if they know that they have an advantage somewhere, they work to pick that out. Whether that be, I don't know, Beauden Barrett plays as a fullback and just stays back there and commands, or whether like he did against Ireland, he comes up into the attack, takes a ball off, you know, and makes something from it. There's not that for the Wallabies. Literally, Korobidi's try, as good as it was because Taniela Tupou, our reserve prop, broke the line and offloaded it to him.
Yeah.
And whether it was someone, anyway, a forward broke the line and offloaded it to him, and that's how Marika got the ball, like in a threatening position for the first time. You know, and like you said, the backs stringing something up between each other, that shone through with Kirtley's performance. In the first half, he was good. He was good under the high ball. He was coming up, planning stuff. And in the second half, when that disappeared, he disappeared and he went off the face of the earth. And like, again, most of it has to rest back on Cheika, because we didn't take Jordan Pataya, who looked injured for about 10 minutes before he got subbed off, until the 70th minute.
Yep.
So England ran all their subs through like they do. We are sitting with James O'Connor on the bench. We don't bring him on until there's 10 minutes to go. So there's no potential for an injection or a change of pace or anything. Kirtley didn't get pulled off until around the same time anyway. And it's like Tamua didn't get used until the 65th minute this time, instead of pulling Lele off early like we had been. It was just ridiculous. Like,
we definitely needed that change, I think. But then again, you also look and it's like we came out of the first half and we looked good.
Well, we did.
And then it just kind of nothing happened. Like, obviously they scored before the 50th minute, but then it was just penalty goals. So it's not like we were getting dominated for us to make big changes to the squad, but it did need to happen as well. So, you know, it's a little bit hit and miss with what we do, but yeah, we really needed some change, probably around that 50th minute mark, if we were going to do something like Tamua coming on and James O'Connor coming on. Like, that's what we needed, and it's not what we got.
No, it's not. And one of the things that the Cheika has always pushed against has been kicking in play and planning to use the tactical kick. And I'm not a big fan of it. I haven't really studied that much. But seeing how teams like New Zealand and even England against us use it against a rush defense and use the kick to, you know, turn the opposition around and make them work more and wear you down, I think that's something that the new coach coming in, that we need to bring in. We need to be able to, you know, have a plan and stick to it. Because like you said, the backs is just winging it. Half the forwards don't work. It's just like, it just sucks. And I mean, obviously the turning point and probably the one blemish on Poe's game was that he threw an intercept try. And that was the, you know, Johnny May runs nearly 80 metres to score. Yeah. And England go from, you know, 3-0 down to 14-3 in like 2 minutes, and that was a massive turning point because a lot of this game, we had 64% of the possession overall in the game. A lot of the game was like it was for the Raiders against the Roosters. We were throwing everything in England and we just couldn't do anything, and that's the most disappointing point. And, I mean, really that's it. Just lazy forwards. I'm sick of seeing guys in Wallabies jerseys who clearly don't care, but then 2 days later they're happy to post about how hard they had to work in the World Cup. It's like, well, I mean, I get it, it's whatever. And obviously the ironic thing about that is the only people commenting saying like good World Cup are all their teammates who, you know, there's no fans in these guys' comments saying, yeah, good job, good shift. Literally all the fans commented on Poe's post. I didn't see many other people on anyone else's. And rightfully so, because no one fucking worked. None of the bench forwards did anything. None of the other forwards did anything. And it's just, I'm over it.
Yeah, but I think also, you know, a little bit different. Give them some credit in regards to, you know, we did hold on to 64% of the possession and most of the game was in England's half.
Yeah.
Maybe it does just come down to the fact that our backs have been extremely lackluster. Like, I don't know if you agree necessarily, but it's like, I just don't think we should be playing Kurtley Beale anymore. Like,
no,
he just shouldn't be selected. Not necessarily because he's bad. Like, for years, I've not rated him. And we've had many discussions over that, but I think it's just like time to move on, get someone young in who has a lot of flair and, you know, just do something new at this point. Like, we have 4 years to grind before the next World Cup, and that should be our goal. Like, we shouldn't be looking for, you know, any now attention. Like, we've had not a bad, but a sad result in the World Cup, and we just need to be looking for the next one. But I think we just need to have a big shift in our back line and grab some, whether it's, you know, new players coming up and through, or just finally, we've had so much switching around. We just need to find like the team that works or start to develop youth in the Australian side. But I think it also just comes down to where the hell do we go next, because, you know, a new coach obviously coming in, which I don't think we know who that's going to be yet.
No, not yet.
With the amount of turmoil and stuff that's come out after Cheika resigning and, you know, going off about the CEO and, you know, therefore it's actually going to be really interesting who comes in to replace and what type of coach they're going to be for Australia.
Yeah, it is. Well, there's been a lot of reports come out, and the potential candidates are, you know, Dave Reaney, who was coaching the Chiefs. I think he's over at Glasgow now. Eddie Jones, obviously, Aussie coach, who we've already had coach the Wallabies. And then there's also Jamie Joseph, who just finished coaching Japan. I don't know what's going on there, whether he's going to leave or resign. And then obviously Dan McKellar, and one that I actually hadn't heard of before, but Scott Wisemantel. Have no idea who he coaches. He's an England assistant. So, I mean, there's a few good options, but whatever happens, we need to look at, and I hate saying it, but we need to look at what New Zealand do and how they run. And you can tell that, and this is the thing that I think New Zealand obviously has the ability to afford this, but they have a certain amount of experience you have to be essentially before you even get considered for the head coaching role for the All Blacks, because obviously Scott Robinson from the Crusaders has been spoken about, like he might take over after Steve Hansen leaves this year. But there's still that sort of, the NZRU doesn't want to appoint him because he's still pretty young in his coaching career.
Yep.
And I think that benefits them, because I don't know if Steve Hansen is going to go coach anywhere now. And if the New Zealand job is his last, that means that the whole time he's been coaching, that's all he's cared about. And what I feel like that's sort of created for New Zealand is Steve Hansen can lay out what he wants and then go to the clubs and happily say, this is what we're running for the All Blacks. Would you like to steal something? Because if this is his last job, he can do that because he's not going anywhere that he's going to get exposed.
Yep,
you know
exactly.
what I mean? And I think that's
somewhere he has to compete against his own.
Exactly. And I think that's what the Wallabies need to do. Whether we bring in a coach who might leave and coach somewhere else, but we need to have, whoever we bring in needs to have top-down total control and influence over the clubs. I'm not saying that we have to force all the other clubs to play in a way, but you look at it, what it was between the skills difference between 2015 when we picked up Mick Breen in 2017 and he started doing exercises and coaching drills with the Super Rugby clubs and how much the skill of the Super Rugby players has picked up and shown through in the Wallabies now. It needs to be the same approach with the coach. If the next coach comes in and he wants to run a tactical kicking game, we need to start training our players to look at that, because you look at New Zealand and like we've said before about the All Blacks, they play this sort of basic game that they build off of each week.
Yep.
And that's what we sort of need to establish in Australia. We need to establish what the identity of the Wallabies is going to be, show that to the Super Rugby clubs and let them run away with whatever they want. And then you need a coach who's going to look at that and say, hey, let's bring in this element from here with these players. Let's not, like Cheika has done, he sort of, we pick off form and try and either bash their players into the playing style or bash a playing style onto the players.
Yep.
And it just hasn't worked. And we need that top-down correlation. We need all the Super Rugby clubs to agree and sort of work together, because ultimately, like you said, our target should be, and I'm happy for it to be, if we get a coach come in and say, our goal, like Jamie Joseph did in Japan, he went in and coached the Sunwolves in Super Rugby and obviously the Japan national side, and he said the whole time, my target is this World Cup.
Yep.
We have someone come in and say the next target is 2023, so let's build to that. I'm happy if the Super Rugby teams underperform a little bit, but it means when we get to the next World Cup, we're genuine contenders.
Yep.
Not going through because we're, the second best Tier 1 team in our pool, and then we go and get smashed in the quarters. I want the next World Cup, we need to, like you said, put in a youth movement, get in some new players. Like we have the Junior Wallabies. They won the friggin' World Cup last year. They beat the All Blacks for the first time in ages. Like we need to bring in youth and just trust them to build, because the target should be the next World Cup. That's what we need to win.
Agreed.
Like Super Rugby success doesn't mean anything, because if the Reds or something win it or, go to the grand final and lose, it's not guaranteeing bum on seats. Rugby is dying in Australia. Like people don't want to watch the professional when they can sit at home and watch the NRL, which is a lot more competitive. Like we need to win a World Cup. That's what it's going to take to get rugby back on the map. And that's what the target should be.
Yep, that's completely fair. It's just, it's going to be that building of a new culture, whether it's both in the playing style and just, the perspective of players and coaches. Like there just needs to be a big shake-up, which is exactly what we're going to get with a new coach. It's just going to depend who that is and how they go about it.
Yeah. And it's one of the things that comes back to Australian culture too, is like how we all want to succeed so badly that we don't sort of care about the others around us. And that's something that we need to put aside when we appoint the next coach. But I mean, there's not too much else to say really. It was a disappointing game. Whatever happens, we need to target that World Cup and work hard to it. But
yep, exactly.
I mean, 40-16, what can you say?
Yeah,
not many positives.
There's no positives to take away from it besides the usuals. And I think it's just, we certainly move on from an upsetting World Cup, but we look to the next. And, I think for me anyway, it's probably the most, even after such a lackluster World Cup, the most excited I've been for Wallabies, because we finally get a change.
Yeah.
And whether that takes 6 months to see or 12 months to see, like it's just going to be exciting to see a fresh new Wallabies and see what the mentality comes from the players and just the style we play from now on. Because like you said, we need to stop playing this football that's, trying to match our opponents or playing off form. Like we just need to, obviously it's so easy to look at the All Blacks and think, oh, why can't we just do that?
Yeah.
But the way they play, it's like they play to their style, and if they lose, it's one, a surprise because they're so good, but two, they hit so much harder that next week because everything that went wrong, they've adjusted and improved. So we need to kind of take that mentality on of we're going to have our culture and that's the way we're going to play. We'll make slight adjustments when need be for our opponents, but we're going to stick to what we do, not just kind of see how the game's going on and then try and make adjustments at halftime, which has seemed to be the case.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things with the All Blacks that they seem to do, and I don't know, I need to get into watching more of the All Blacks games to see, what they actually do, but they don't seem to have a set thing, which is sort of predicted. It comes back to the predictability. Like the Wallabies always seem to, we attack one way for a certain amount of time, either it works or it doesn't, and we kick it out. The All Blacks seems to be, They just have, like we've said, they have their set game plan and they let the players think about what they want to do. Like if they're picking and driving and it's working, they keep it going. If it's not, they throw it out wide. And that's where it comes back to that simplicity of their identity is just their forwards all work regardless of who it is or what they are. They like the one thing that annoys me about watching the All Blacks is you watch, Super Rugby and maybe Joe Moody has a couple of average games for the Crusaders and then starts for the All Blacks. But once he puts on that All Blacks jersey and gets into that system, he looks like the best prop in the world when, 2 months prior, he looked extremely average and like he was very beatable. And that's just, again, it comes back to the simplicity of letting the players think for themselves and, having a simple game plan. And that's what we need. And I mean, yeah, like you said, we just have to let the identity or whatever it is shine through, and I'm keen for it. I am.
Yeah. I think it's a big see where this goes.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's much more to say about the Wallabies besides, congratulations to Cheika on, his run. Whether we've agreed or disagreed with him through certain periods of his time as coach, it doesn't really matter now. It's, wish him well and good luck with whatever else he has planned at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
Just asking you, obviously, because you watched all the games, is there any game you'd like to go into detail on for the rest of the World Cup, or did you just want to brush?
I think I'll just brush through the rest. Yep. I mean, obviously, Ireland losing by that much to New Zealand was disappointing. Yep. I think Ireland's World Cup sort of got knocked off its hinges when Japan beat them. I don't think they expected that, and I think Ireland sort of looked a bit shell-shocked after that. And I mean, they played against Samoa and Russia, I think, or something, and that's not exactly games to get back into form for the quarterfinals. And I mean, they put in a decent effort, but at the end of the day, if you let New Zealand get out to that much of a lead with the way Ireland plays, they just couldn't catch up. They don't have catch-up footy in them, which is one of the things. But I mean, again, fair cop to New Zealand. Whoever wins that game this weekend is probably going to go on to, against New Zealand and England, is probably going to go on to win the World Cup, and rightfully so. I think they're the two best teams in the world right now. Okay. And I mean, that's just really shone through with how much they beat Ireland. So
you said that about England, New Zealand a bit. You don't think South Africa's got that at the moment? Because I feel like that's the only other competition. I think we can both agree Wales probably shouldn't be in the World Cup.
No, they shouldn't.
I mean, not the World Cup, but still be, competing for the trophy. But where do you stand with South Africa then?
See, the thing, actually, I think, South Africa, I have thought about that now. That's a good point. I think I was too quick to jump on England and New Zealand, but New Zealand, England, and South Africa, that's the only three that I can see winning the World Cup.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, no disrespect to Wales. They've obviously made it to the semis for a reason, but at the end of the day, just to brush Wales's game, Wales was completely out of that game until the French got a stupid red card for a throw and elbow. It was completely malicious, rightfully deserved, in a rolling maul. And, it took Wales, an 8-man scrum against a 7-man scrum with a French number 12 at number 8. I mean, it was a French feed, so Wales did well to turn it over. But what happens is Wales won the scrum dominantly. The ball come out. Number 7 for Wales ripped it out of the number 8's hands, and then it sort of went back to a player who just dove over. So it was an extremely lucky try, and Wales didn't look that impressive even against 14 men. So I think, and that's really my thoughts, is that Wales were lucky to win against France. I think either way, whoever would have won that game, whether it had have been France in the end, I don't think they're any match for South Africa. So I think and that's the thing that surprised me about South Africa, is how much they put on Japan, particularly in the second half. Their centers defended amazingly. The defensive scheme that they used against Japan worked ridiculously well. They were so quick off their line, got right up in Japan's face and just completely shut down. And they out-physicaled, they just completely took Japan out of the game, because the physicalness that Japan had shocked Ireland with and beaten the other teams in their pool with, it didn't matter against South Africa, because we're talking about a team where their two locks are 6'6", their reserve guys coming off the bench are 6'5". The South African team is gigantic, And Japan's attempt to use the physicality that they had against them just completely got meadowed. And I think it was great play from Andre Pollard, and I think the centers really shone through. I think Faf de Klerk, the number 9, won man of the match for the game, but it really should have been Damien Diallo-Landi, the number 12. He's going to be massively important this week against Wales. If he can shut down the Welsh centres, who didn't look that impressive against France, I mean, yeah, I just think, going forward, South Africa definitely is a contender. And I think you're right. If South Africa make it this weekend, the World Cup final is going to be a cracker, whether it's New Zealand or England that they face.
Yeah, for sure. Like the World Cup, and as you would hope, it's going to shape up to be a good game. But I think it's definitely en route to probably be New Zealand, South Africa. And I feel like we both probably predicted it since as soon as the pools came out, and it's like New Zealand and South Africa are in the same pool. Unfortunately, that means one of the teams, which was South Africa, are going to finish second.
Yeah.
But it means they go straight to opposite sides of the playoffs, or, the playoffs, and they can't meet each other until the finals. And they're probably, next to no doubt about it, the two best teams in the world. So that's just what you expect to happen. Yeah. And not, discrediting South Africa, but they've got the easiest side of the run too with how it ended up compared to New Zealand, who have to go through Ireland and then England, compared to Japan and now Wales, who, it's just a much easier run, but it's going to be good. I think my biggest takeaway at this point now is I just want South Africa to flog Wales, just absolutely dominate them.
And I think there's definitely potential for that to occur. I mean, I apologise to any people that are fans of Wales that are listening, but genuinely, I think, again, I still think, I said it last week, ironically, they weren't the worst team in the quarterfinals, but they were damn near it. For the winners, they were the third worst team. France played better than them and lost because of some lucky play.
Exactly. And, the red card came with just over 30 minutes to go, and they still didn't manage to, they got a penalty goal at one point, but they weren't able to score until like the final 5 minutes.
Exactly.
You got to give credit to France for holding on for so long, but, unfortunately, all good things come to an end, and that was the end of France's World Cup.
It does. And what's going to be interesting is, to watch if it's England versus Wales, that's going to be a very interesting, I think most likely that will be the third, fourth playoff. And I think that's going to be a really impressive game to see, how much England, whether it was really worth Wales making it through just to, hopefully get smashed by South Africa and then get ripped again by England or New Zealand, whoever doesn't make it. But I guess that's sort of it. I mean, I think it's a coin toss between whoever wins at it. In my eyes, England, New Zealand.
Okay.
Now I'm hoping New Zealand. I mean, obviously England knocked us out, and I don't like to see New Zealand win, but I want an all Southern Hemisphere World Cup final. If we're not there at all, then, give it to someone down here so we can continue to prove that we're the better hemisphere. But
yeah, for sure. And that's exactly where I stood as soon as Australia came out. It was like, well, I'd rather Japan or South Africa win it, just because, you love the fairy tale dream of Japan making it through and dominating their pool, but unfortunately having to come up against South Africa, which is worst case scenario for someone finishing second in a pool. But it was very much so I want South Africa or Japan to win because of, just the fairy tale storyline or a Southern Hemisphere team. Yeah. And after that, it's New Zealand, just because it's another Southern Hemisphere team, as much as I don't want New Zealand to have that.
Yeah, exactly.
The trophy once again.
Exactly, but it will be well deserved. They're easily the best nation in rugby, and I think,
There's no doubt about that.
One thing that I'm going to take away from this World Cup with Wallabies not being in competition anymore is I need to start respecting New Zealand. I cast it aside because you never want to look at something that's, better than what you have to support in a way. That's sort of how I felt with New Zealand rugby the past, but
it's just sad to look at a team that has everything right and is doing everything so well compared to almost a bunch of misfits at Australia that can't keep it together for 2 weeks, can't perform well 2 games in a row. Exactly.
And, I mean, that's it, really. We're both tipping New Zealand and South Africa, and hopefully that's the final. But, I mean, obviously just before, do you see Vunivalu might be coming back to
I did see that.
rugby?
It's a interesting prospect, but I don't know if you disagree. I don't think he has it
How old is he?
He's still young. I think he's only like 23 or something. I'll quickly have a look, but I'm pretty sure he's only 23 or something.
See, the one thing for me is he'd have to play on the wing, but he's a bit big by international wing. Like, you know, teams are spreading out a lot more in defense now, and it's a lot harder for a big winger who's got a big body to try and, you know, beat him with speed on the outside. But, I mean, I'd love to see it, really. You know, any injection that we can get into Australian rugby is good. But, again, it just comes down to the fact that do we take another import? You know, like, do we take someone else who's come back from league, or do we try and grow a pathway and get a bunch of boys that want to play rugby, you know, playing for the Wallabies? And, I mean, he definitely would add some X factor if he clicks. But it also took Marika 2 years of very decent performances and being forced into the Wallabies very early to suddenly, you know, this World Cup campaign, he's starting to look like a good rugby player. And I think that's the thing. We have to get Vunivalu and get him into the squads and, you know, give him 2 years to warm up. But is it worth it? I don't know.
I don't think it is. Like, you know, obviously supporting Storm. So I just quickly had a look. He turns 24 next month.
Right.
So, yeah, he's at 23. So he's still young and got plenty of time to develop. But I think just watching him, and it could go two ways. He's very, let's just say, an excitable player. Like, he's always going for interceptions. He's always looking for that big hit.
Right.
And misses a lot on those things. Right. And it goes two ways. Either you get dominated in rugby union for trying to play that way. Like, just because personally, and I'm sure you probably agree, just because we're on the union side, I just feel like rugby union is more talented than league.
Yeah.
That's why you see a lot of people succeed when they go from union to league, but not necessarily league to union. Just because there's so much more to the game and, you know, just different things like that. But I think either he just gets dominated for that reason, or because there's an extra 2 men on the field, he's able to play that way and be covered.
Right.
Where if he does that in league as the winger and without anyone to really cover, the opposition normally scores a try. Where in rugby union, you might have that coverage of someone coming across because there's 2 extra men on the field that can allow him to play that excitable way and go for those 50-50 balls.
Yeah.
And hope it works out because there's going to be someone behind him, someone coming across that can cover. So it could go one of two ways, but I don't know. I just don't think I'd see him playing well in union. Right. But you hope he does, and if he goes there, let's hope he achieves and brings something new for Australia.
Exactly. That's a really good point with his play style, and that's one of the things Corabetti suffered with is he'd come off his wing for a run like they do in league and then just wouldn't work back quick enough, and you know, if you turn it over, it's over. And like they just spread it wide and score.
That's the thing. Like, I watch league so often and it just angers me the way you're allowed to be so lazy.
Yeah.
Like rugby union, you can't stop for a second because if you leave that man isolated, you're going to turn over the ball. But league, it's like, oh, well, you know, a kick's just gone over the top of all our heads. We'll let 3 people run back and they can take the first 2 hit-ups and then everyone will finally be onside. Or you still see people drifting back on the 3rd tackle, walking onside. And, you know, that's the way of the game. And why wouldn't you get that extra rest when it's available? So, like, you can't discredit them. But it just, like, sucks. Because, you know, you remember having to work that entire time. And especially in our positions where we are those loose forwards that are expected to be everywhere.
Yeah.
You aren't allowed to stop running the entire game. So, it's a different game. And it could go one of two ways. And let's just hope it's the positive side of it. But I'm definitely probably looking at the other side. And another one, not that it affects rugby union in general. Did you see apparently Valentine Holmes has accepted a contract to come back to NRL?
I have. I did see
the Cowboys, $1 million contract supposedly.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting. It's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, his NFL thing has, I'm going to, not to be mean, but it has failed.
Oh, it was a failure, but he stepped into it so quickly. And the truth was, as much as he can't play this year, he shouldn't be playing this year. Like, he's not at that quality to be playing, and he does need another year to develop, work it out. And as I've said before and you've agreed with, like, he needs to actually be giving a few other positions a go.
Yeah.
Versus just going, this is what I want to play. This is what I've been, told I'd probably be good at with my skills from rugby league. Let's just give that a crack. And if it doesn't work, I just stick with it or bail on the entire sport.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, this is something that I have thought about a bit, because I think, I haven't spoken to you, but I think eventually it would be a good podcast topic to bring up is, what sort of sports cross over a lot. And I think the NFL is such a standalone sport in what it is compared to everything else. I really, having given some thought to it, this might be a pretty bad take, but I think basketball is more relatable to rugby union in even just the basics of like how you defend someone, how you follow them. I think the NFL, you have one side fully focused on something and the other side fully focused on something. Like you said, I think the best position for league players to come across and play is either cornerback or safety. And no one wants to do that because you're not the guy running 40 yards to score a touchdown.
Exactly. It's not the pretty position to play. But I think even in that same regards, the only position that's convertible is probably fullback because that's what a cornerback or a safety does. Like, a winger could go play receiver, but on average, we're a lot slower, we're a lot smaller, we're a lot less strong in comparison to the NFL players, so they don't want us there. Fullbacks, Jared Hayne, Valentine Holmes have both tried to do it, go to running back, but once again, like, we're just not big enough or fast enough, even though these are our top athletes in NRL. We're not big enough or fast enough to try and compete with the Americans over there that are 1 in a million talents. Yeah,
exactly. And I think to me, when I seen, and I hate to say I gave up on him early, but when I seen that video come out of, them in what do they call training camp, where you had like, I don't know, the 4th or 5th string linebacker who went on to get cut. Valentine Holmes caught a pass in the flat. He ran to the side. He caught it on the sideline basically and was tiptoeing down the sideline. This linebacker comes across and just smacks him out. I don't know if you ever seen that video.
No, I didn't actually.
But this linebacker is nearly Valentine Holmes' size. He didn't end up making a squad, and he just comes across and lightly pops Valentine Holmes. And Valentine Holmes, who was trying to stay in, just completely gets smashed out and nearly loses his footing. And like you said, I just don't think we have the athletic... And it's not even like the athletic capacity. It's just the fact that, the catching angles and the fact that you, in rugby and in league, there's sort of an unspoken code on how you tackle. There's nothing like that in the NFL. You can be catching a pass like this. The moment it touches your hands, they're free to smack you right across your shoulders, in your back, and in everything. And I think, that's one of the things that might have hurt Val Holmes is you have to go from a sport where everything's in front of you and you have to do both things to you have to focus on and be elite at one thing. And, there's so many different factors. And I think it's disappointing if he does come back and gives up on it so quickly. But at the end of the day, I don't blame him if he's going to make $1 million over 200,000, 200K sitting on a practice squad not doing anything.
Yeah, it's a tale of two storylines, I guess. And, for any NRL fan, I'm sure you're jumping up and down and pretty excited that he's finally going to be back to league and, what that means for the Cowboys. Like the Cowboys, I don't know how they're affording it because... they don't have a great team outside them, but it's kind of like Michael Morgan and Tamalolo and Valentine Holmes are all going to be on pretty much $1 million contracts. And that's a lot of money on 3 players.
Yeah, it is.
But, it's definitely exciting for that. And, for any Origin fans and Australian fans for league, obviously that's an exceptional addition for that long term because, he's going to walk in next season, and I have no doubt about it, he's going to be in that top 3 talks at fullback without question.
Yeah.
It's pretty much going to come down to, it started to become the Ponga versus Tedesco show, especially early season. Ponga fell off alongside of the Newcastle Knights, but it's just going to be Valentine Holmes is going to walk back in and he'll probably take the Queensland job, and it's just going to be between him and Tedesco, who's the best in the league at fullback. So it's hard to walk away from that when you are so talented in this sport, and I I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of next year he's the Dally M medalist.
Yeah.
Like, that's just how good he is. But it sucks to see someone with so much potential could have made it in the NFL if he was just guided the right way or gave it enough time, which it appears to not, isn't going to be the case.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the good things about him going across so young is that, you know, even if this is just completely rumours and he does decide to turn around, because something weird, I think it's his contract with the practice squad. I don't know if you know the technicalities, but he can't come back out here until December or something. He has to stay on their squad until the Jets play the Bears or something in week 12 or week 11 or week 13 or something. It's what Nine News was reporting last night. And then apparently he's going to come back out here and he's going to leave the practice squad and then come back out here and sign. But
well, I wouldn't exactly trust anything Australian media has to say, because I'm pretty sure every report I've ever seen from them, it's just like minor details are always wrong. Like even the one that was talking about Valentine's coming here, like first thing they said was, you know, Valentine Holmes after not making the 55-man squad. It's like it's a 53-man squad roster, and you're not even getting something simple like that right. So there's always mismatches and things that don't align, but I didn't realise that was the case with the practice squad. I would have assumed you could just dump someone and sign someone up, but it's not like Jets would want to either, because they've got this free extra practice squad member through the international program that, you know, they don't mind just holding on to him because it's an extra position to see if someone can develop.
Exactly. And, you know, I think we've really said all we can say about Valentine Holmes, but one of the things I will be interested to see is whether he comes back with, you know, different strength and conditioning in a way, you know, sort of being in that NFL, whether he can, you know, take some of it, maybe he learns some lessons, or, you know, it could be really interesting to see whether he comes back essentially ripped as shit from the NFL ways and sort of can translate that into the NRL, because, I don't know, I can't remember much of Valentine Holmes playing. I think it was because he was Maroons and he played for Sharks, didn't he? I didn't really give much of a stinking doo-doo about him, but, I mean, it'll be good for Origin if, you know, Maroons can get, you know, more competition just means better, you know, games and stuff.
And it's going to be interesting. Does he come back and pretty much... Because I wouldn't be surprised he came back in similar shape as Hayne was. Probably not as big, but he could very well be like too big to be a fullback now. And like that's where he's going to play for Cowboys. But like coming to Origins, like, do you really want to dump Ponga? Like,
yeah, true. You could
what
just
happens
shift him
there?
to
Like, I think the only kind of option is either you put Ponga on the wing or Valentine Holmes goes into the centres, which wouldn't argue with. You know, Will Chambers is obviously off. Where's he off to? He's off to Japan.
Japanese rugby, yeah. I can't remember which club, but he's going to one of the bigger ones. So.
Yeah, so that's also interesting. So, you know, that's a big spot to fill, which I think Valentine Holmes is certainly better option there anyway. So,
yeah.
Only positive signs for rugby league, him coming. But I think, you know, the way he left rugby league was, I've achieved everything I can here. Let me try something else out.
Yeah,
I feel like he just hasn't given that enough of a crack, which... you know, is easy to say for us who aren't taking an over 800 grand cut to go play a different sport. And, you know, I hope a dream is achieved compared to making $1 million every year. Yeah. But, you know, if he sticks it out and would have or does stick it out with NFL, he can be earning a lot more than $1 million a year if he succeeds. So, I don't know. Definitely support him and excited to see him play wherever he is. He's a talented athlete and elite in whatever he wants to do. It's just going to be what's next.
Yeah, it will be. It'll be, I don't know, it'd sort of be interesting if, I mean, this is just a theory, but it would be interesting to see, you know, he's achieved everything. Everyone knows he's a great league player. There's going to be demand for him whenever he comes back. Maybe he spends another year on a practice squad trying to, you know, make the squad, but then really he sort of treats it as, you know, 2 paid sabbaticals in a way, you know what I mean? Like 2 years away from league and then just comes back. You know, he still makes 400,000, but if he's just on the practice squad, never getting any playing opportunities, obviously his body's going to be pretty rested. You know, he could potentially play on for a long time, but I know that's a stupid theory, but I mean, yeah, like you said, support him whatever he does. He is a pretty generational talent and it'll be interesting to see whatever he does.
Yep, absolutely. So I think moving on to the next things, we're probably not going to go into too much detail for obvious reasons as we speak about it, but the baseball, this week. World Series is currently being played while we are recording. So Nationals are currently ahead, but Nationals, as we already knew, had clean sweeped the Cardinals, and then Yankees were knocked out by the Astros. So a World Series to come. Astros versus Nationals, and I don't know about you, but I definitely thought the Astros were potentially even on their way to dominate this one, but thus far, there's still time, but thus far Nationals, in my eyes, are causing an upset.
What's the score right now? I have no idea.
3-5 in the 8th innings.
How many innings are there in baseball?
9.
9? Wow. So is that game 2 or game 1?
That's game 1.
Right. Damn. That's surprising. Could we see another... Who was it that upset a couple of years ago? Was it Cubs that shouldn't have won, or was it the Indians?
No, Cubs, the year they won, there was just so much hype because they hadn't won it in so long. I think they were deserving of it.
Right, okay.
If I can remember correctly.
Okay.
But I think it was just the excitement and hype that they were someone I don't think they'd won in like surplus or 50 years or, something like that.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, obviously any time that an underdog makes a game out of a series is good, particularly in an American sport. It'll be really hyped, and hopefully it translates into the Nationals squeezing a bit more out of the Astros, but obviously I don't know too many technicalities, so I'll just be rooting for the Washington, is it?
Washington Nationals, yeah. But yeah, after knocking out the Dodgers in a big upset there, it'd be fantastic to see a upset against the Astros too, and that'd be almost a fairy tale for him.
Yeah, it would be.
Coming from that situation and coming here out of a wild card spot, so definitely probably gonna. Oh, and Astros just got another
home run.
I don't know if it was a home run, but a run anyway. So 4-5. Comebacks on. But we'll see how it ends up. But yeah, I think probably just for the sake of the underdog and whatever, we're probably both back in the Nationals, and we'll see how far that can go.
Exactly. And World Series is on. NBA's returned. It's summertime, lunchtime. American sport is starting back up. Toronto beat New Orleans, ended up beating New Orleans in
OT.
In overtime this morning by 8 points. And obviously, Lakers are down right now, not surprisingly, by 6 points to the Clippers.
So Clippers have managed to make a little bit of comeback after Lakers were ahead.
Well, that's just the standard that the Lakers set last year, is that, LeBron and the starters carry the team and then the bench falls off completely. But
yeah, exactly.
I mean, obviously, first game of the season, we can't read too much into an 82-game season about the first game, but...
Oh, yeah, for sure, and we definitely see that after watching the Pelicans Raptors. Pretty much the Pelicans are the new Lakers.
Yeah.
With the amount with Ingram and Ball and everyone else going over there, so...
Exactly. And it makes it exciting, like we've said in between ourselves the past couple of weeks, is that the NBA now we're not going into the season with who can take down the Warriors. It's who can actually win this thing, It's like you look at the West, I think Lakers, Clippers, Denver Nuggets, and I still think Golden State are contenders. I think even though Klay Thompson's probably going to be out for the year, reports come out yesterday that he's probably going to be out for the year. I think Steph and Draymond Green is still a formidable, losing Kevin Durant is a massive loss, and so is losing Iguodala, but that gave him a ton of cap space to sign a better bench. So, I mean, maybe that influences them, but then, you keep looking, you got the Trailblazers who, since the league has sort of gone into duos now, Damian and CJ's obviously proven, but it's going to be tough for them. And then, you got Spurs, Dallas now have Luka Doncic, and they traded for Kristaps Porzingis.
Yes.
Rockets have Russell Westbrook and Harden, which I'm not that high on yet because we don't know how they're going to work. But I mean, if they click, it's going to be ridiculous, whether that means that one plays 10 minutes while the other sits on the bench and then the other one comes in and plays 10 minutes. I don't know how they're going to scatter the ball.
It's going to be really interesting because, I'm personally, once again, not high on either player. They're both fantastic players, but they're both very much so,
high possession.
For lack of a better term, ball hogs. And, they're great at what they do. And, you see Harden, the numbers he puts up the last couple of seasons. It's incredible, what he's doing. So you can't fault him for what he does, but it just, sucks also. But it's going to be interesting with them there. And, even like the 76ers and I think the Jazz, who haven't been mentioned up to this point, like it's just an entire league. Like you said, previous years, it's like who can take down the best there are.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
this year, it's like there's probably 10 teams I think we'd probably agree on that are actually like somewhat contenders.
Yeah.
And it's just teams of duos, like 2 elite players in every team or 2 players that work together really well. And it's just who can get ahead there.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And, like you said, 76ers from the East. Obviously, I missed the Jazz, but Jazz too in the West are definitely contenders. I think, Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, and then you still think about the other pieces they have around him. I mean, this is a team that took down, a Jazz team with a rookie or a second-year guy, and obviously a very elite defensive center in Rudy Gobert, but they took down a team of Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, and Russell Westbrook, which we now look back on and know that, didn't live up to the expectations it had, but that is because of this Jazz team that outshone. They have a great coach. They're going to be very well coached. And I could even see, I think I've been too low on the Jazz. I really think they are, potentially championship contenders. I think, like I said to you before we started recording, I think out of the East, the only guaranteed contenders this year for, the championship in my eyes are the 76ers and the Bucks.
Yep.
I think the Pacers
agreed.
and Nets are up there this year. I think, Pacers, Oladipo has to come back, so there's some issues there. I think they have a hard-working roster around Oladipo, and if they keep that same mentality, it might work. Nets are missing Kevin Durant, so it's all on Kyrie for what I assume is going to be the entire year. But, I mean, other than that, the East, we really don't know. Like, John Wall's still out for the Wizards. Jimmy Butler's now on the Heat. Celtics have lost Kyrie and brought in Kemba. Bulls have a young core. Pistons still have Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin. And you just look at the Raptors, like, they got pushed today all the way by the Pelicans, who, because of the West,
very
probably
young team, so that's quite exciting too.
Yeah, Pels are a young team and they're in the West, so they're definitely going to get pushed down people's rankings because just of how competitive the West is, and they'll probably end up in the lottery because of it. But they're not a bad team by any measure. But we just need to wait and see on the Raptors and the Wizards and all that. And I mean, that's it. I don't even want to talk about everyone else in the East because they're just
exactly.
trash.
It's not even worth the time.
I apologize to the Knicks fan that listens to this podcast. Sorry, Samuel.
Yeah, it's not really worth the time speaking too much right now because, there's only been, 2 games played up until this point currently. And it's just, you can't predict it at this point. An 82-game season, there's so much that can change. So it's a bit of a wait and see, and I think you've probably got the right idea. We'll probably come back to this every few weeks or so and just give an update, see where teams are looking and where they're probably headed towards. But I agree, there's a few teams that are real standouts and then a lot of teams that are just average or below average area.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think the excitement definitely lies with Golden State, if they can still be a formidable team, which I think they're certainly capable of. They've still got some great athletes there.
Yeah, exactly.
Phenomenal players. So it's just going to be a lot of regression, obviously, after making, I think, the last 5 championship games. So it's going to be a shake-up for the team, but I think they can definitely withstand it. And Raptors, same thing. Losing Kawhi, they haven't really made any great signings. It's just going to be if they can stick together as a team, which was, I think, why they won the championship last year.
Yeah, essentially.
But it's just, and then Rockets, whether they can put it together or not, I think we're both doubtful about, but there's certainly potential there. That they've got 2 fantastic players without considering the rest of the team.
Yeah.
It's just a wait and see, and I think obviously we're both kind of high on the Lakers, LeBron and Anthony Davis.
Yeah, they have to
Pretty much
perform.
the best big man in the league. And
Yeah.
LeBron's LeBron.
I know.
That's all that needs to be said. It's an exciting duo.
It is.
But, as we look, they're currently losing to the Clippers, who are a good opponent too. They're certainly exciting with Kawhi there now and Paul George too.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I really, besides predicting, I can't really say too much else on the NBA. It's just exciting that it's competitive this year. I mean, it's going to be electric.
That's the best part of it. It's an exciting league that we don't know. Not we walk in going, all right, who's got Golden State in the championships?
Exactly.
So it's definitely a positive on previous seasons, but it's to see where it goes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, moving on to the NFL now, I think obviously I missed a few games this week, but there has been some very surprising things. I think we start with the two trades. Obviously, we spoke about the Jalen Ramsey trade last podcast.
Yep.
But Mohamed Sanu being traded from the Falcons to the Patriots and Emmanuel Sanders going from Denver to the 49ers. So obviously the two remaining undefeated teams
still looking for more.
Which is, obviously what you want to see. You don't want to see the best team in the right now, the best two teams in the league. I think not even just by record, by playing, really. Rest on their laurels and say, "Nah, we're right." Like, you like to see them going out and being aggressive and trying to win. I mean, what did you think about those two moves?
I think, in all honesty, I look at both of them, and the first thing I said about the Sanu trade, and I think I've said about the Emmanuel Sanders, they are certainly overpaying. But I think you're in a situation where you're 6-0 and 7-0, that you can afford to overpay because you are looking towards the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Like, that's your goal. You want to win the Super Bowl this year. Who cares what the draft ends up? If you have the Super Bowl, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. So I think that's really exciting. But starting off with the first trade, which was the Sanu trade, I'm just confused. Because they have N'Keal Harry, who's been injured so far this season and is finally back training. And I don't know if he's looking good yet, but he's training. He's coming back. Josh Gordon's been injured, but I'm pretty sure that's not a long-term injury and he should be back soon. You're soon going to have Julian Edelman, who is, kind of excitingly is going to be probably back in the slot, which is going to be pretty sick because he's probably the best slot receiver in the game.
Yeah, he is.
But Julian Edelman, one of the safest options in the league. You've got N'Keal Harry and Josh Gordon, who are two phenomenal guys. Like, Josh Gordon is got that big play potential that he could. I think you said exactly this before we started recording. He's a type of player that'll have 2 catches in a game for 3 targets, but go 60 yards and a touchdown.
Exactly.
Like, that's just who he is. He's got that big play potential, which is exciting. And N'Keal Harry, obviously the first round draft pick for the New England Patriots. On record, they don't have the greatest draft picks. They're not the greatest at picking wide receivers, but N'Keal Harry looked sharp in college, and hopefully that transfers to the NFL, but we can only wait and see. I just think, the biggest thing that I see them as overpaying, because they're two great wide receivers, it's just their age. Sanu's 30 years old, which as a wide receiver, you're starting to come to the end of your years. And obviously, you look at someone like Julio Jones and he's 31, but he's still the best there is, where Sanu's just like a second wide receiver, solid option, but nothing great. Same as Emmanuel Sanders, who's 32 years old. That's my perspective when I say they've overpaid. I think just the value they've... okay, let's look at Sanu. I have no doubt about it that Patriots, it'd take a few years to develop, but Patriots could sign any wide receiver that's in college at the moment with their second round draft pick that they just gave away and after 2 years, get someone better than Sanu.
Right.
That's just my perspective from it and why I'm saying they're overpaying. But once again, it comes back to they're the 2 undefeated teams. They're on track to be making the Super Bowl, and that's their objective. Next year doesn't matter at this point, because if they win it this year, the team's happy, the company, the business is happy, everyone's going to keep their jobs, and it's just going to be, continuing to build for the future, but they've won it now, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right, they are very old, and I do agree. I think the Pats could essentially, draft someone and turn them into Sanu in a couple of years. But you also have to look at the fact that, even though Josh Gordon and all that are returning, it is pretty concerning that, if it's not a suspension or anything, Josh Gordon seems to be getting banged up. And I think that's just a product of, he's pretty up there in age. I think he's only 26 or 27, but at the end of the day, he still is getting up there. And I think that's what, that's why the Pats made that move, is that as they start to come up against some tougher opposition, after their opening 6 games or however many, 7 games now, I think, they might be trying to preemptively plan for when the run starts to get shut down and they have to start passing. And, if they're missing Gordon and Nikhil Harry, they can't exactly rely on Edelman and whoever else they've got on their squad to, carry them. But I think I like both of the moves, really, in all honesty. Okay. I mean, I don't agree with the age. And I do think that, they gave up, 2 picks for Sanu?
I think it was just a second round pick.
Yeah, right. And Sanders was 2
And Sanders, they've given up a 3rd and a 4th, but they've received a 5th in return, as well as Sanders. So that's probably not the worst trade, but I don't know how much longer Sanders has got in the league either.
Yeah, exactly. And I really don't get that move from San Fran. I like it, of course. You're adding a guy who was on the Denver Super Bowl team. He's got that. He's got veteran leadership. He's obviously, there's a reason he's still in the league at 32 when he's not, not as much of the wide receiver that he used to be, just in terms of playing. But, I mean, do the 49ers really need, another receiver in a way, considering how good they're... I mean, they haven't established, obviously, who their wide receiver is. They've got Pettis and they've got whoever else they've got. Goodwin. I can't remember. Yeah, Marquise Goodwin and stuff. But is Sanders really the guy to be your number one wide receiver?
That's the thing. I don't see Sanders coming in as a number one. 49ers, the passing game is a secondary thing. They don't really care about it all too much. Kyle Shanahan doesn't seem to, because he's got such a strong running game.
Yeah.
But you're just adding another overall average, in my opinion, wide receiver to a bunch of other average wide receivers. I feel like you either needed to be signing someone who's high potential, but then again, that's what all their wide receivers are.
Yeah.
Or someone who was a clear, distinctive number one and given up more, potentially, the same way Cowboys did last year for Amari Cooper. Do something like that. But, I don't think there's anyone readily available on the market. And, yeah, it's just a big question of what's next. But I think it's just Super Bowl. That's what's on their minds.
Yeah.
So the trades make sense for that reason, and I can't, disagree with why they're making that trade. Personally, not what I'd be looking towards, but they've seen something there, and, hopefully it works for them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, the thing for both of these teams is the Patriots' schedule for the Patriots this year has been, obviously their defense has shone, and this is more getting into how legit these teams are for the Super Bowl. But
yeah, so I think that was one big question we wanted to raise. Are these teams legit? I think Patriots, we all know, will probably be in the Super Bowl. But are 49ers more so? Are they the real deal?
And you look at the 49ers schedule, and, so far, they won at Tampa, who we now look back on and say they're very 50-50, more so a bit of a shit team. We look at the Bengals, they're 0-7 now. You look at the Steelers, they didn't have Big Ben for that game, I don't believe.
Yep, and they didn't have Big Ben, and the only reason they won was because James Conner fumbled it on his 10-yard line with a few minutes to go.
Yeah. And then they beat the Browns, who we now look at as a very 50-50 team. They need to turn their season around.
But to be fair, dominated the Browns.
Oh, yeah.
Browns only scored 3 points, and not many teams can say that. I think Patriots will even struggle to say that come next week.
Yeah, next week.
Yeah.
And, and then they beat the Rams, which obviously was surprising. Obviously blitz the Rams, only let the Rams score 7 against them.
Yeah, which, once again, that's the thing too. The offense isn't coming together as well as a lot of would have hoped, but they are two of the strongest on paper teams offensively in the league, Rams and Browns, and they managed to keep them to 10 points combined.
That's the most impressive thing.
Yep, exactly. It doesn't seem to be who they're up against, they're winning. And I think, in my eyes, this defense is the real deal. Richard Sherman, I wasn't sure how many legs he still had after, coming back this season. I wasn't sure if he was still going to have it.
Yeah.
He seemed to be dominating. It's still such a good man-to-man, shut-down cornerback. And the rest of, their defensive line is so good. Yeah. Bosa, Buckner, D Fords, it's so strong, and it's been put together really well. And Bosa's not been a surprise, but especially that Browns games, he was so dominant.
Yeah.
I don't know if you caught it, but the pressure he was putting on Baker, which doesn't have a great O-line, but wow.
Yeah, and that's the most impressive thing. And, you look at the 49ers, they have 4 first-round picks on defensive line. And for years, even I looked at it and like, what are you doing? You're picking high in the lottery. Why aren't you going for a quarterback or something? And then obviously they add Jimmy G. Not this year, the year before. It was last year. Last year was Jimmy G's first year with the 49ers, wasn't it?
It was his first starting. I think they picked him up prior to that, though. Just like halfway through the season.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Yeah. And, I think the defense, interestingly enough, we speak about having a good enough defense to compete in games with a good offense. The Patriots and the Pats right now are really showing that they have elite defenses, like Super Bowl winning defenses on their own potentially.
For sure.
And the worrying thing for me, though, with the 49ers is that obviously their schedule thus far has been very easy on them. Like they've had Tampa, Bengals, Steelers, Browns, Rams, Redskins. We sort of can look at all those teams now and say not a lot of those are good at stopping the run. And we look forward and they have Carolina coming up. They have the Cardinals. They have the Seahawks. They go back and face the Cardinals again. Then they have the Packers, the Ravens, the Saints, the Falcons, the Rams, and then the Seahawks again. And I really think, maybe the Rams are going to tone things up, so that next matchup will be important. I don't know how good the Seahawks are at stopping the run. Do you have...
I don't know how they're going to go. Like, they've obviously got Jadeveon Clowney and not Frank Clark, Bobby Wagner, who are fantastic for that. But the Seahawks are very 50-50. Like, they got absolutely dominated this week by the Ravens, which we'll probably go into a little bit later. But they can either shine and be outstanding or just not come together very well. So that's going to be really interesting, those 2 games. I think the biggest test for them is this week, though, against the Panthers. Right. Because the Panthers have been severely underrated with how good they are at just stopping everything. Right. The amount of takeaways they're getting, the amount they're shutting down. Like, I think they're one of the lowest yards per carry and things. I don't have the stats in front of me, but they're incredible overall. So it's going to be a big test. But I think, going back to are they the real deal? Like I said, the defense is the real deal and the coaching is the real deal. Kyle Shanahan is phenomenal. And the way he's got this running game going, I think a big loss is in Juszczyk, their fullback. A lot of teams don't. This is one thing too, and I don't know if I said it last week or if I've said it to you at all, but it's severely underrated having a good fullback. Yeah. There are 2 teams in the entire league that run more like 21 offense with 2 running backs, which one is usually the fullback, than any other team, and by a large amount. Do you want to guess who those 2 teams are?
It's got to be 49ers and Pats, doesn't it?
That's exactly right. It seems like they both have this same game script that just is easy play. You're defending, like you're protecting your quarterback with an extra fullback. You've got a fullback that's, leading the rush, and some of the work they do is just phenomenal. But no other team's doing it besides the 2 undefeated teams. Yeah. Like, surely you can have a look around and go, what are they doing right? And this is one thing that's aligning for both. So I think they are the real deal, but I think Jimmy G hasn't looked good at all. Like, I'm not sure about the stats, but I'm pretty sure he'd be very even on passing touchdowns and interceptions. Like, he's not great, but that also comes down to, like we've said, he hasn't really got the wide receivers options because he's got average with potential quarterbacks, wide receivers, but not great wide receivers. And I think Emmanuel Sanders is just another one of that. So I don't think that's really going to help him in the passing game.
Yeah, exactly. I think, I do think they're both legit. I just think, like you said, this week will be a big test to see whether, Carolina's rush defense is actually letting up an average of, where is it? They're down here somewhere. They are the 22nd team in the league. They're letting 4.7 yards per rush attempt, I think, if I'm reading these stats correctly. But interestingly enough, they're only allowing, 4.9 yards per attempt on everything. That's on total yards on passing and rushing. So, the Carolina defense is definitely going to be a real test. If it gets to the point where Garoppolo has to play the game, I think adding Sanders helps him.
Yep.
But at the end of the day,
he's a safe option.
I think right now, it's not totally out of the question to say that this could potentially be the Super Bowl game. but I just trust the Patriots more because I know that Tom Brady can play quarterback. I mean, Garoppolo, I don't trust yet.
And yet, let's talk about the Patriots for a second. A lot of people have been talking a lot of trash about Tom Brady just because he hasn't had to do much. But that's the thing. The team is so good, he hasn't had to do much.
Yeah.
And he doesn't look bad by any means. He's just playing a safe game. He's getting a lot of screen passes, a lot of quick balls out, and that's just the way Tom Brady plays. He isn't a quarterback that has a huge arm strength and throws 60-yard touchdowns.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just not him. He threw an absolute dime to Philip Dorsett in the end zone in the Jets game, but that's kind of it. He'll get one big throw, good throw, and that's all that you need from Brady.
Exactly.
But so this defense, definitely the greatest I've ever seen, and I've only watched NFL for a few years, so that's why. But they are on track to break so many records. It's not even funny. Okay, let's look at, they've had 2 shutout games in the first 7. And, that's against the Jets and the Dolphins, which aren't the greatest opponents. But there's been no other team that's had 2 shutouts in their first 7 games since the 1940 Bears.
Wow.
They're not breaking, but matching stats that are back from the 1940s. And I can't remember what the other stat was. I can't remember if it was takeaways or it was points scored or, something along those lines. Or maybe it was just points conceded. But the only other team that's on track with them were the 1920 not even Buffalo Bills. They were the Buffalo All-Americans.
Wow.
So, that's what they're on track for. And I'll just quickly, I've got a quick list up in front of me of, some of their stats that they're on track for. Fewest points allowed. That was the 2000 Baltimore Ravens. They conceded 165. New England's on track to only concede 110 points, which is 6.9 points a game. Not even a touchdown. Fewest touchdowns allowed was the same Baltimore. Defense, which only conceded 18. And so far, I think they've only conceded 2 offensive touchdowns. Then there's, interceptions. They're up there. They're not meeting records, which was San Diego with 49 interceptions in 1961.
Yeah.
New England are on track for 41, but just, another 4 interceptions against Sam Darnold. Just their defense is incredible, whether they're in 0 blitz, which was a lot of the pressure they put on Sam Darnold, which is you don't have a safety. You just add an extra man to the blitz and put so much pressure on. That's where they dominated. But, yeah, fewest yards allowed. They're on track to do that. Just getting there. Fewest rushing touchdowns, fewest passing touchdowns. They're just any record there is to break, they're breaking it. And, just a side note, for anyone who's interested in fantasy, the record for the most points scored by a defense and special teams was 1985, the Chicago Bears, which scored 226 points. So far this season, New England, which I'm the proud owner of in my league, has scored 156 in 7 games and are on track to get 338.2. Which is pretty much an extra 50% on the record that's stood since 1985. So it's a stupidly good defense.
It is. And
it's unfair having a defense this good.
No, it is. And I think that's what makes San Fran and the Pats so legit is, even though, the argument is neither of the sides have really been tested yet, I don't believe. And I do believe that. I still think the matter of the fact is, regardless of what happens, even if they haven't been tested or not, they're either conceding very low amounts or, not even conceding at all in some points.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
At the end of the day...
They both had shutout victories.
Yeah.
I think... I can't remember what our takeaway... I don't know if you remember what it was, but we kind of had a takeaway last week of what makes a good team. This week, my takeaway is just a defense that is this good and a, coaching staff. That's all it is, because that's where they dominate. And, just a really weird side note that's just a funny fact. So Washington Redskins have just, not last week, but the week before that, sacked Jay Gruden as their coaching role. Once upon a time, only a few years before, the 3 men they had in their coaching staff and didn't decide to make any of them their head coach was Kyle Shanahan, who's leading the San Francisco 49ers currently, an undefeated team. Sean McVay, who took Rams to the Super Bowl last year and one of the most popular coming up coaches. And the other one was Matt LaFleur, who's currently got Green Bay on a 5-2 or 6-1 record. 6-2 record. So, and they decide to pass them all up, get rid of them, and stick with Jay Gruden.
Yeah,
that
it's shocking.
It's embarrassing.
But I mean, yeah, just to finish up, I think 49ers and Pats are legit. I think they are, and I think you're the same, aren't you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think, like I said, Pats have it all, absolutely everything, and they lack slightly. 49ers lack slightly in the passing game, but they're pretty much rushing for 200 yards a game combined. If they're rushing that much, they don't need to pass.
Yeah, exactly. And I really think that's it.
That's it.
Their defense is that good. And I mean, it's insane. I mean, obviously going into the Redskins, they got beat 9-0 this week, so it probably wasn't their first. Probably was their first non-blowout of the season, but I mean the other things that happened. I mean, Saints beating down the Bears. You predicted that in last week's podcast. I didn't think that was going to happen. I thought that game would be a lot more competitive than what it was. And I mean the scoreline. I'll let you go, but
yeah, the scoreline doesn't give it justice whatsoever. So you even look. Okay, I'm just going to quickly bring up Trubisky's stats, who we've said's awful. His stats look good.
Yeah,
don't get me wrong. He has a decent completion rate. He threw for 2 touchdowns and 250 yards. That looks all right. But that pretty much all came in garbage time. He got his 2 touchdowns in the final 4 minutes of the game. That means 3.5 quarters of doing absolutely nothing before he finally did something. And that went from a score being 36-10 to 36-25. So the score didn't give justice how much Saints dominated.
Right.
It was just ridiculous defensively, offensively. Bears had none.
And do you think the Saints are legit? Do you think that
Saints are beyond legit? I thought, in the past 4 games, I think it is, they've had no Drew Brees, or even 5 games, and Teddy Bridgewater is currently undefeated, which I would have been impressed. I was pretty much walking away from that going, if he can keep a positive record, they're in a good state of mind, or even.
Same.
But he's managed to keep them on what are they sitting at now? They are 6-1.
6-1, yeah.
Without their quarterback.
The only loss was the game where Drew Brees went down halfway through it. So they didn't have a week
and
to
it was
plan.
Against the Rams, so it's that's a good offense and defense, a good formidable opponent that you don't mind losing against necessarily.
And the funny thing is, going into this season, a lot of talk was, the Saints might be past their Super Bowl potential, and if they win, they need to win this year. But, looking what they've done with Teddy Bridgewater, obviously I thought going into the season that a lot of their Super Bowl hopes rested on Brees. But, you look at this team without Brees, and it's still doing the same thing. It's still winning. It's still chugging along.
The teams come together even better than it has previous seasons in my eyes.
So I think, Saints are legit. I think Bears are disappointing. I think it just comes down to the fact that, ultimately their defense isn't looking good. But you also have to realize that it's the same thing that we said last week. Clearly, I haven't watched any Bears games, but I'm going to assume that Trubisky's going 3 and out or 5 and out, he's maybe getting a first down and then only having, another couple of plays. And then the Bears defense is being held onto the field for so long, worn down. And then by the end of the fourth quarter, Khalil Mack is running on 1 pinky toe instead of 2 legs, and he just can't get pressure on the quarterback. Akeem Hines is injured, not Akeem Hicks is injured anyway. So a lot of the pressure teams can now, the defensive line is
run a little bit better,
weaker, and they can double team Mac and not have to worry about Hicks winning the one-on-one. So
you've absolutely nailed it. What you think's going on is exactly what's happening from every Bears game that I've watched. Trubisky and whether it was Chase Daniel aren't that good, and they can't keep their offense out there long enough to, 1, do anything, but 2, to just keep the defense off. And that's exactly right. The defense is really strong until they've had to be out there for 75% of the game, and are worn out, and they just can't hold on any longer.
Exactly.
I think moving on from that, I think Ravens Seahawks was a big game, And Ravens just dominated, especially defensively. Seahawks everywhere. They had so much pressure on Russell Wilson, who's so good in the pocket and was dodging and weaving and just magic, getting balls out he shouldn't have. But it was either there were just that many people in the blitz that he eventually came down. But I don't think he ever took a sack. He just always managed to just palm the ball off to someone nearby, or he'd make a throw. And the amount of drops the Seahawks wide receivers had were ridiculous. And like, DK Metcalf had one catch. He caught it, started running, and as he started running, he just dropped it. And, you know, the Ravens guy, I can't remember who it was, just picked it up and ran for a defensive touchdown. Like, that was just the story. It was, you know, 2 defensive touchdowns for the Ravens. Lamar Jackson being an absolute monster and running, like, you know, even his touchdown he scored on the 4th down. Like, it's pretty cool. Like, you see the after of it, like what was happening on the cameras, and it's like Lamar Jackson walks off because they don't think they're going for it. They're just going to take the 3 points and run with it. And the coach is just like, Brian Harburg, I think his name is, something along those lines. He's just like, do you want to go for it? And Lamar Jackson's like, yes, let's go for it. So, you know, they quickly run over, call a timeout, get the offense back on, and Lamar runs for a rushing touchdown. Like, it's a team that I don't think is going to be anywhere near the Super Bowl. They're going to make playoffs. I don't think they're going to be near the Super Bowl, though, because they have too many weaknesses. It's just about whether or not the opposition exploits those weaknesses, which the Browns were able to do, even as a bad team.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a disappointing thing about, you know, 2 great defenses emerging and even more defenses becoming really solid, is that teams like the Ravens, they won't have the fairy tale that the Eagles had a few years ago.
Yeah.
I don't think that's possible this year. I think, you know, even if the Ravens do make it to the Super Bowl, which means they'd have to go through the Pats, potentially they're going to go on and face 49ers or Saints, great defenses, and it just becomes
the only thing
hard.
they have on their side is that Lamar's too unpredictable. And that's what every single game you watch from the commentary says it, and anyone online is saying it. It's just, how do you defend Lamar Jackson?
Well,
like, there's a difference between Russell Wilson, who can dance around a pocket and you can't sack him, and someone like Lamar Jackson, who's just like, I'll take a run. And he rushes for like 150 yards a game.
Yeah.
Like, you can't plan for that because there's no one else who's capable of doing that.
Exactly.
Like, Michael Vick is one of the historically greatest ever running quarterbacks. And all his records are about to get smashed by Lamar Jackson. Like, I don't have the stats up here, but Lamar Jackson's on track to run for like 1,300 rushing yards.
That's
which
ridiculous.
is like, if a running back runs for that, they've had a good season.
Yeah, I know. And last time we had a quarterback who was this good as a dual threat guy, they went to the Super Bowl with Cam Newton. You know,
And Cam Newton wasn't even this unpredictable as Lamar Jackson.
Exactly. And the one thing that amazes me about Lamar is, I don't know whether it was the Browns game or the week before, but his ability to stop on a dime is like a wide receiver. I remember he juked, it was against the Chiefs. He juked someone.
It was against the Chiefs.
Juked this guy out of his body. It was just, I think Lamar is starting to become I think he already is a legit quarterback in the NFL. Even if his passing doesn't develop from here, which I still think it will continue to, he has enough of a dual threat to be a threat for years until he loses his pace. And touch wood, I hope it never happens, but I think he is, going to emerge as a legit quarterback. It just, it'll be the rest of the Ravens, like you said, their weaknesses come out and obviously get patched up around them.
Yep. And that's the difference too. Like, you go back to another great dual threat was Robert Griffin, but they forced him to, he wanted to become a passing quarterback, not a rushing one. But the Ravens are structuring this entire team around Lamar Jackson, and it's the best thing for Lamar and it's the best thing for the team because they're going to get all the right results. So that's exciting long term. I think we move on to, obviously, the beloved Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
With a beyond ridiculous strong performance.
I know, it was actually really good to bounce back from the Jets. I haven't caught the game yet, but I'm just going to tell you, when our defense plays like they're meant to play, like they come into the season, expected to play, that's what happens. We win 33-7, and I know that the Eagles secondary, their cornerbacks, their safeties, they're banged up, players are playing out of position, being forced, poor coaching, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, like, the Cowboys played extremely well, and it just shone through in their performance. Dak Prescott has copped a lot of flack, and this is the one thing that annoys me about the NFL is that the quarterback always gets the flack regardless of how the team plays. And I think that I think that Dak showed that he has been playing to this level every week, but it took his defense showing up for him to, put in a performance. And I mean, he had 1 touchdown and 1 interception, but he went 21 of 27 for 239 yards. Zeke was massive. This is the Dallas Cowboys are a Super Bowl contending team. The defense just has to show up.
I think, that was huge. Like, they managed to make 2 fumbles out of Carson Wentz in the first 5 minutes, which led to the screen pass touchdown to Javane Austin, I think his name is, and Zeke went for a rushing touchdown. So, like, it just put him on such a good foot, and Carson Wentz just wasn't able to come back from that. Like, he got the touchdown, obviously, it got it, but that was it. But Dak was just making safe throws all game, which was really good, and Amari played out of his skins. The deep balls he threw to Amari there wasn't even a doubt Amari was going to come down with him. Like, he was just phenomenal in every aspect of the game, Amari. This is definitely I don't think his stats give him credit, but probably one of the best games I've seen from him ever. And in other regards, there was a play action pass where Dak got a rushing touchdown. Like, he just ran out and he, obviously had gone to play action. Then he headed the same way as Zeke. The plan was to throw it to Zeke, but there was a defender was coming across, and he just kind of faked it, went himself, and ran into the corner. It was just phenomenal by Dak. Like, you could see him develop just even throughout this game, and was throwing the right passes, making the right calls, and the right decisions. And I don't know if I agree that they're Super Bowl caliber, but they're a lot better the team than they have been for the past 3 weeks. We just have to wait to see how that continues, because they're 3-3 against 3 bad teams and then 3 good teams, and then Philadelphia aren't shaping up the way everyone thought.
Yeah.
But we'll see how that continues. Then I wanted to flow obviously into, I don't think there's much to say here, New England Jets game. New England just defensively, they're phenomenal.
Yeah.
They still haven't conceded a passing touchdown in the red zone. 4 interceptions, 2 of them were in the red zone against Sam Darnold, who's an up-and-coming but great quarterback. It's just dominant performances all round from them. Like, you can't say a bad word there.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I really have nothing to add about the Jets. I think Sam Darnold was disappointing, but I mean, he's still young, so.
Yeah, exactly. So anything else you want to make mention of? I think we're coming up to the hour and a half area.
No, not really. I mean, Packers beating the Raiders by as much as they did hurts, but Aaron Rodgers was on fire through, 6 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns.
One surprising thing out of all the great quarterbacks they have, that was the first time the Packers have ever had a perfect passer rating in their franchise history.
Yeah, well, that's interesting.
And even just surprising that, they've had Brett Favre there, who never got a perfect passer rating. Aaron Rodgers hasn't until this point, but 5 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown as well, just to cap it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, phenomenal. No team can stop that.
No, exactly. And, Raiders, obviously, Josh Jacobs had a big game. Obviously showing that the template for the Raiders' success is essentially just going to be solid enough defense, where the defense down with Jacobs and then let Derek Carr take control. I think, Vikings beating the Lions, I think that's worrying for the Lions. I think Packers are humming along now. I think they're definitely the most formidable team coming out of that division. I think disappointingly, somehow, the Lions are nearly on the same record as the Bears, which is disappointing on the Bears front.
Well, they'd actually be just under them.
Yeah, they are. So, I mean, look, I think Vikings might be able to steal a wild card in that division, but I think the Lions season is starting to trend towards a negative now since they lost that game. And I mean, Chargers...
They've got one of the hardest divisions, and, early season they exceeded what we thought, which was awesome to see. But I think they're going to be a lot better than everyone thought, but they're just not going to get the right results because they've got such a hard division and such a hard schedule.
And Chargers obviously are in the same boat too. Melvin Gordon.
Just so many injuries.
Yep. Injuries on the defense, and Melvin Gordon fumbles on the goal line for a potential game-winning touchdown, so they lose to the Titans.
Yep.
They're not going to win that division now. They're way too far behind the Chiefs. They still have to play catch-up to I think Denver. I think they're still behind Denver and still behind the Raiders anyway. So
they're behind the Raiders, and I think they're even with Denver.
Getting a wild card in that AFC where, you've got Ravens, Steelers, Browns might turn it around. We still don't know. It's going to be tough for the Chargers. So I think their season's over. And I mean, Colts beating the Texans, I think that sort of
Big game.
shows you who the one in that division is. I think it's, Texans are really, they're going to have to fight hard for a
It
playoff
comes down
spot.
to whether Deshaun Watson brings out magic each game or, they don't have the best coaching staff there. But
That's the thing. I really, I hate to say it, I love Deshaun. I love DeAndre. I'm a fan enough of Johnson. I like what they have, but they need to lose and they need to not make playoffs so that they can get genuine change and
that's
get some
fair.
direction in their franchise.
But the thing is, too, they can't really have that. Obviously, they have poor management overall, but they can't really get that because they've given away their first overall picks for the next 2 years, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Even just a new coach, I guess, I think until they get, that's actually a good point. I didn't even think of that. Until they get their first round picks back, it's not going to make a difference who their coach is because there's not going to be that ability to change. But I think that's really it. I mean,
Yep. I think you should wrap us up.
so, thanks for listening. This is podcast 10. I think this is packed. I think this is a really
Yeah,
good.
this is definitely one of the best ones we've put out, packed with plenty of fuel for your fire, and then
that's
let's
right.
go with it.
Still trying to get down below that hour and a half mark, down to that hour mark
Still
maybe,
not
but
achieving it.
I mean, it's whatever. Whoever's listening enjoys it. It's whatever. We're, got big plans, but thanks for listening. We will see you next week.
Cheers. Bye.